Hello and welcome back, this is ProTailDev back with another Corrupting Spring video. This time what we're going to be working on is we're going to be focusing on the different abilities that you're going to be able to use. So the first ability we've already kind of worked on, it's just being able to shoot enemies and destroy them. Specifically I've called that ability Origin for reasons I'll explain in a minute. The second ability is Form, the third ability is Energy, and the fourth ability is Time. So these four things are related to spring and specifically, so things like they all kind of connect to change. So things with time, growing, origin is things like creation, movement, things like that. So it's all kind of connected into each other with these four different aspects. And you're going to need all four at the very end of the game to be able to progress further. I'm also going to make it so that these abilities are necessary to complete certain levels, and you're going to unlock them as you go. So the first one you obviously unlock to be able to kill enemies or to create, or the Origin ability, which is going to turn them back into ordinary spirits. The second ability that I want you to unlock is Energy, which will allow you to see, because you need energy obviously to grow and things like that. It's very necessary in spring, and so you're going to need that to be able to see where you're going, and you'll be able to shoot a ball of light to be able to stick to walls so that you can see. This is going to be necessary because I'm going to have some really dark levels. Then you're going to have a form, which is going to change the form of specific vines and plants to allow you to progress through the level. So things like being able to create walls to help you block like enemies and their enemies' attacks, or to be able to progress through the level by creating bridges and things. And then the last one is time. So time is going to let you slow down time. Simple as it is, it's going to allow you to be able to maybe avoid certain attacks that might be just too quick for you to handle. Also help you be able to land on specific platforms that might be going too quickly. Things like that. So that's what the four abilities are. And we've already worked on one, so now we're going to bring in all the others, and that's what this is going to focus on. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with being able to create our own script for being able to switch between these abilities. So I'm just going to call it Switch Gun, I think I called it. Yep. Or whatever. And what it's going to do is going to allow us to switch between our different abilities. So I'm just going back to our script, our spirit shot, and I'm just having a look at what we're working with, and I want to tie it into that script somewhat as well. So we're just going to create some methods, and I'm going to use some switch statements instead of if statements. Very relatively the same, they do the same thing. I just thought I'd try something a little bit different, see if I like it. I don't really use switch that often, so I thought I'd give it a go. And we've got different methods here and a different, which are going to contain our different code for activating and deactivating our orbs that are inside our gun. This is more for visual representation, it doesn't have too much of a functional use. Again, this is just going to make it so that the player knows which one they've changed to. And we're just going to get the game objects for the different spirit sources that are in the gun's hand. Which is where the origin fires from, where the abilities fire from. So again, this is more visual representation, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to deactivate them and activate them when inside the when the specific methods are called, or the functions are called, should I say. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create them inside here, inside of our gun, in the same place that our origin is. And again, this is more for visual representation. It's not really going to have too much of an effect on anything, apart from the energy, because light is going to come from it. Don't know if I like it too much, so I might change that later. However, what I do is I just set up the script into our player and try it out. So it doesn't quite work at the moment, so that's because what's happening is it's going down the list of our case, and then it's reaching a point where it can't go any further. It needs to be reset back to the top, which that's what I'm doing there. So what I do is now switch, I can switch between them, but multiple of them are being activated on top of each other, and that's because I'm not activating them in the start specifically, as well as I'm activating them, reactivating certain ones which now I fixed. So I realised that I need to set it to 5 because 4 isn't being called properly. So that's what I'm doing here, is making sure that all of them can be activated, which they can. It was working. And what I do now is I need to make sure that I noticed that the scale was a bit off for the UI, so I need to make that correct, which I did. So now I add a point light to them. I will add a point light to all of them, but for now I just focus on that one for the energy, because again it's going to have a light coming off it. So that's what I do. I realise it's not quite strong enough. It's a little bit off, so I play around. I test it and change it quite a lot to make it better and to suit, so it's not too overpowering or anything like that. And then once it's done, I actually make a bunch of different game objects, again set them with different light sources, and this is one that's going to be shot specifically from the light, from the energy. So you'll be able to shoot it, as I mentioned before, and it'll go further across, and it'll allow you to light up the wave from a distance, which will be important later. And then what I do is I need to create a bunch more game objects ready for us to create more things that can be shot across from the specific origin point. So once that's done, I again add a bunch of lights. I make sure I rename them correctly, and then when I come back into it, I realize that I don't actually where is it? Yeah, so I realize that I don't actually like the idea of the switch gun and the spirit shot being a separate script, so I move everything that was in the switch gun into the spirit shot because it's pretty much controlling the same things. I might as well control it in one script since it's not that much code, and then I deleted the script in the player. That way it's all one thing, and then I just need to reset it up, the game objects, the prefabs and things, and so it's working again, no issues. I then decide that I get rid of the idea of the switch statements and instead have if statements. This is really because I like if statements a lot more. I think they just look neater and better, and they do allow a little bit more flexibility with what you want to do. So yeah, that's why I go with that. Make sure that's a minus because it means be able to go all the way back up and be able to activate all of them, which I can. So now we can switch between different abilities. What I also want to do is that the can shot false needs to be activated whenever a different ability is active. That way we can't shoot our origin ability. Also, when we're in the switch, when this function is specifically activated, I want time to slow down. So that's what I've done there. I realised also that it's a bit annoying to have can shoot as a way of limiting certain abilities. So what I do is have a can shot, what I do is I have a specific bool that will determine if something is locked or not. That way they can fire, instead of having it rely on fire, which all of the abilities have got to use. This way we can actually control it a bit more precisely, what is active and what isn't. Of course, then I add the game objects in that are going to be shot. So the actual spirit balls themselves that are going to be shot at enemies, at platforms, at different places from the origin's position or from the specific hand position, should I say. And then add in these instantiated objects at the very top, which is something I've always. You could always just have it built in at the bottom, but having it at the top and then assigning it I think is better. Then what I do is I make it so that certain ones are activated when others aren't, depending on the lock. So what I'm doing here is determining what the lock is, depending on what you switch to, and then if something is or isn't locked, we'll determine if we can shoot, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to decide on kind of if I want to shoot or not while going through this process. So what I'm doing here is when this is a destroy shot, I want to make sure that everything is true, so you can shoot again. You can shoot any of them once a spirit shot has been destroyed. And then what I do is make sure that the time scale is set to 1 when when a spirit ball has been destroyed. When it hits something, I want time to carry on. This will really play into the time a lot as well, so that if you hit an enemy, time will kind of carry on and speed back up. It'll be very interesting, I think. So once that's all been turned into a prefab and then assigned, I test it out. So what I've done here is I've slowed it down. I've slowed time down by shooting that, and then I've slowed down. This is the form ability, which you can shoot. And we've also got, again, I think this is time still, which you can slow down. I already know that the origin was working and everything else was working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to be working on creating a little bit of effects. This is me just playing around with what it might look like, some effects. So I just create a sphere that's going to be orbiting around, and then I give it like a little bit of a rotation. So a bunch of orbs, it's a bit hard to see there, but there's a bunch of orbs, a bunch of spheres just circling around. Thought it looked interesting, it was just something to try. I then decided that on the time I wasn't going to shoot anything. Instead, I was just going to slow time whenever it's active, and I think it's better that way. If you still hit something with the other spirit orbs, spirit abilities, spirit balls, it'll still speed time back up. So I think that was something important to mention. And what I do here is I make sure that when something is hit, it does set everything back to true, allowing you to shoot again. Okay, so yeah, it was working. And what I decided to do next is, what I decided to do then is, again, this is a lot of trial and error, especially with the time. I was trying out different things, and then what I did is I decided to work on making sure that everything was set to true back in the start section, because there was a bit of an issue where when you first started it, the bools weren't set correctly. So at the start I make sure that they are set correctly, and then finally what I do is I need to, after a quick test again, I decided I want to create some new materials for these specific spirit balls, that are spirit sources that are inside the hand. So we'll just call it spirit sources, and I wanted to give them a bit of illumination, kind of what I've done with the claim, so they're going to have a bit of glow to them. I also play around the lighting as well for the energy, that way it can kind of give it a bit more of a reddish glow. So yeah, after that, as you can see, I've added some emission to the specific materials so that they'll glow, and then kind of add on to the light. And then on the prefabs, I add those specific colours to them. Again, change the lighting to be more reddish. I might change that a little bit later because I think it's a bit much. Maybe a bit brighter colour would be better. Maybe a brighter red if needed. But I prefer it. I like it. I just think maybe it's a bit much. And so I do a proper test with all these different abilities. There you go, there's me shooting our new shots, which we made prefabs before, and had a look at the energy. So next is to work on the form ability. So working on the form ability will allow me to be able to grow specific plants or vines from specific positions. So what I'm doing here is I created a platform which is going to have a plant grow through it, and that's just up there so that I know what to shoot at. I turn it into a prefab just to make things a little bit easier, then add the vine in as the model. Next what I do is I add in a animation. So I quickly create an animation for spawning, for being underground, and I'll create one a little bit for withering, so when it comes back down. So what it's going to do is I create the underground one first, which is going to be underneath. I then create, afterwards I then create a spawn, which I'm working on there. And what it's also going to do is scale as it comes up, just so it looks like it's actually growing. And then I go back into the controller to make sure that it's all working correctly. And then I add in the wither as well, which I've already created off screen. Make sure that they can all cycle together, and then make sure that begin grow and begin wither can be triggered through script. So I create a trigger specifically, and I make sure that all of the animations are connected correctly. And then once that's done, what I do is I add in a trigger. So we need to be able to control when the spirit ball is hitting the grow bed to be able to grow, and we're doing that with a trigger. We also need a trigger later for determining when the orb needs to be the spirit ball needs to be destroyed. So what I'm doing there is when it hits, it's going to destroy the ball, and that's going to handle that. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to be handling, I noticed that I hadn't set up all of the different shots which have been set as a specific prefab, so I make sure to set them all correctly with the right names. And then what I do here is make sure that the animations have been set correctly by putting them on the top one. I add the trigger box as well, so that we are able to trigger it with a tag which we got at the top now, which is the grow bed. So when the grow bed's hit, we need to be able to control the state of the plant, the animation. So that's what I've done here. I've created a new script that'll handle the animation when it's triggered. So when it hits the spirit ball farm with any object with that trigger, what will happen is it will trigger a specific animation that will begin to grow. So that's what I'm going to do. So it's grow bed is the trigger name, or begin grow, or something like that. So I'm setting up the animation here, make sure that it's okay, and then I put in the correct name, so begin grow, which will start our animation, and then I need to begin wither when the animation is over, so after a certain amount of time, which is what I've sorted out. I also do a reset trigger just to clean things up and make sure that the animations do run as they're supposed to. There's no overlapping really, and then I put it in the world to test it. Of course, I test it while I'm on the platform, which is moving, and just throw it in the world, which is why it's weird. So what I do is I put it on this rock which isn't moving, and then try again. So once I tried it again and hit it with the farm, you can see it grows. However, after it immediately hits the top, it immediately drops back down. This is due to the timing, and I realized I don't need lifetime as a float because I'm only gonna have one time that it'll be able to grow at. I want them to grow at the same speed no matter what, just to try and help the player control when something's activating and isn't. If it's randomized or controlled differently, I think it'll be just too complicated for the player to figure out. So in the world, I've put in a bunch of different grow bags just to test out what it looks like at different sizes. I also think the color was too dark, the material, so I changed the material. I put this one in the middle of the world, in between this rock and this platform, to see if I can jump across using it. Okay, so after I placed that in the world, I was ready to take a break. Next time, in the next video, what we'll be looking at is we'll actually be looking at effects that the source is going to have going around it to make it much more interesting and show when it is activated and when it isn't. And we're also going to be looking at some UI to determine when something is active and isn't, when you can actually shoot again and when you can't, and that'll finish off the spirit shots and the source and everything like that, and I'll probably move on to making levels. So this has been ProTail Dev. I'll see you next time.